Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Law, the podcast where you can hear barristers, judges, solicitors, managing partners and more talk about their lives and careers. I'm Sally Penni MBE. I'm a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester, the joint Vice Chair of the Association of Women Barristers and the founder of Women in the Law UK. This episode is supported by Elevate, a law company that has a vision where legal and business teams work together to advise great outcomes. Their mission is to provide law departments and law firms with practical ways to improve efficiency, quality and outcomes. Find out more at elevateservices.com. Before today's interview, I wanted to remind you about two of my latest books. Black History is All Our History, and a book I wrote with children in mind, but great for all the family, Where Are You From?, which celebrates Black British history. Both are available now on Amazon. Today I'm talking law in an interview with John Croft, President and co-founder at Elevate, offering legal expertise to clients all over the world. John began by explaining how a relatively short-term working relationship can offer benefits to both lawyers and corporate clients over the traditional method of using an in-house lawyer.
If we were talking about a contract and the contract needed to be written and negotiated and finished by the 30th of October, if you can deliver that, does it matter if you're sitting in an office in London or if you're sitting at your kitchen table in Hampshire?
Yes.
Does it matter if you're male or female, black or white, gay or straight? If the work product, the sort of job to be done it's done right and it's on time, what does it matter what you look like? So yes. We looked around and we said, well, kind of what are these other ways of doing this legal work? You mentioned flexible lawyering. So rather than working full-time somewhere, the idea, and look around other sectors, you have sort of interim directors, interim finance directors, people you bring in to do a project. You bring consultants in. Why wouldn't you bring a lawyer in if you were doing some M&A just for the 3 months you need to do the project, and then afterwards you don't need them, they don't need you. Yes. So there's flexible lawyering. There's technology as well. I'll sort of probably come back to that because it's a much bigger topic, but is there any work that technology could help support? There's location and the cost benefit that comes with that. So we've got offices in Poland, in India, in the Philippines.
Yeah, Hong Kong is one.
Hong Kong. All over. So you could have the same work done all the way around the 24-hour clock, so you can have sort of follow the sun if you're in a hurry, but also there are cost benefits to doing work in somewhere like India versus New York, for instance. You can get an equal lawyer to do the same work in the same time for a very different price. So there's a kind of a financial benefit to that. And then there was just consulting, which is helping either the general counsel or the partners of the firms figure out how to run their business more efficiently. Yes. It just happens their business is law, but it's a business. Yes, it's lots of people and it's got an IT department, and how do you run that more efficiently? So we looked around the legal sector and we thought, if you were in another sector, if you were the CEO of a telecoms business, for instance, and you were trying to deliver your telecoms work more efficiently, you'd probably bring in a consulting firm like McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group or something like that. And they do three things. They bring in a bunch of consultants who would frame what your challenge is and then design a solution for it.
Yes.
And sometimes the solution is just they will make you more efficient yourselves and they give you a bill for consulting and they go away and they're done. Sometimes, though, they say, the reason we're good at this is we've worked with 10 other telecoms companies, and they've all got the same problem. And we've actually, here at Accenture, we've got a solution for that, and we can actually sell that back to you as a managed service, and that will make you more efficient. So there's consulting, there's managed services, and then there's technology that can either sometimes do the work and sometimes support the work being done. So if you were that CEO, you would go to an Accenture and they would do consulting services and technology. And when we sat down to talk about starting Elevate, we said, if you were that general counsel or that managing partner, there isn't a sort of Accenture for law. I mean, Accenture don't operate in our space.
No.
So there is nobody you could phone that has got all of those consulting services and technology all for legal. And we thought, is the list of problems that they might be trying to solve sort of never-ending and insurmountable? And the answer was no, it's not. I mean, it's a long list, but there was a finite list of things they could be trying to fix.
Sure.
Can we do this more efficiently? Can we spend less money on that? Could we, so we wrote them all down on a piece of paper. And as I say, you have to remember, and it was 10 years ago now, but you have to remember that before you started, I mean, that we had nothing. So there was no company, there was no customers, there was no revenue, and it was literally, so it was quite daunting. But we thought, if we could build all of that and create this Accenture for law, then we'd be in a very unique situation. So we started building that business. And initially, and it is quite funny, we were doing an internal podcast for our 10th anniversary, and we were trying to remember early day things. And one of the things we did was, because we didn't know how to describe ourselves, because nobody else was doing this.
No.
And I've always said, if we were building a law firm, like even my mum would know roughly what a law firm. If I said, "Oh, mum, we're building a law firm," she just kind of conceptually know what a law firm does. But it's taken me 5 minutes to tell you what we were setting out to do, and there was no other example. So what is it? It's not a law firm. It's not a law department. It's not a consulting firm. It's not a flexible law. It's not a tech firm. But it's kind of all of these things. So we actually put on our website, we are building Accenture for law, because we didn't know of another way of doing it. And then about 2 years later, Accenture phoned us up and asked us to take it down, of course. So, which we did. So we said, okay, we have to come up with a way of defining this bit of the market. And the phrase we came up with was law company. Yeah. And our thinking was, there will always be law departments, there will always be law firms, but now there are law companies. We like to include all of the providers that just do one of those things as a law company as well. So all of our tech competitors, all of our consulting competitors, all of our service competitors, they might just do one or two of these things. We've been bold. We've set out to do them all, but we look at us all as law companies, and the other important thing was that we didn't set ourselves up to be in competition with the law firms. Yes. Because I know lots of them thought we were, but that was absolutely not what we were trying to do. We were trying to bring efficiency to the legal ecosystem, and we don't care which side of the fence you're on. We've got the tools to help you be more efficient. And if you want to make your law firm more efficient, or you want to make your law department more efficient, we'd be delighted to help. And we've got this wide range of ways of doing it. Very few, almost nobody buys everything from us, but they might buy one thing one day, and then next year buy a second thing and a third. And what's nice for us is that by the time you get to the third or fourth, then we actually haven't got any competition, because nobody else is doing all of these things.
All of those things.
So, but I mean, it's a very, very long play. But
it is really, thank you for explaining that, because I have wondered, and there are some other people who kind of touch in those areas, this sort of, is a lawyers for you, I don't know, Lex Mundi, it's not quite clear what they do, but you've explained that beautifully. But your vision for Elevate isn't just in the way you started, of how one practices law by services. It's also in diversity, and also looking at things globally. And if you don't mind me saying so, John, I'm a black woman. You are a white, heterosexual, able-bodied male. And so what are you doing about diversity at Elevate?
We came into this sector with a business view, but as you say, part of that was also just looking at the people that were in the sector. And you're absolutely right. It's not even slightly biased, it's just shockingly biased. And I was invited to speak at this FT event, and I'd been to those things before, and I just I thought it was an after dinner speech, and I thought nobody needs to hear elevate sales pitch after they've had a couple of drinks. So what can I talk about that's kind of was meaningful to me personally? And it just happened that it was, I can't remember which year it was about 3 years ago, it was just at the time when the UK government had mandated all the firms to publish their gender pay gap.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was so off the charts. It just really kind of got under my skin. So I wanted to stand up and say something about it. I say I wanted to. I didn't. I thought I possibly should.
Yes. But
I don't know. Imposter syndrome is the wrong word, but I actually felt, as you say, I'm a white, able-bodied, privately educated. I'm the most privileged type of person it is possible to be, and so I felt I can't be the person to stand up and say this. But it was bothering me. And so I spoke to a couple of people, both of whom you know.
Yes.
I know. One was Denise Nurse.
Yes, brilliant.
And the other was Sadie at Coro. Yeah. And I met up with each of them separately and asked the same thing. And they both said the same thing to me. And I mean, Sandy was adamant. She said, and for anyone that didn't listen to your podcast with her, listen to it because it was great. But I mean, she is on a bit of a pedestal for me. And, she's this amazing human being, but she's got an amazing career. Yeah. And she was on the power list. And I mean, and she said to me, I'm self-aware. I know that I've done very well in my career. I'm on all of these lists. And yet, if I stood up at this event and gave this speech, people would just say, I would come over as a bit of a whiny, stampy feet.
Yes,
because I am a black woman.
Yes.
If you say it, because you are who you are, yes, it will be more impactful than me saying it. And I guess I could conceptually understand that, but I was sort of slightly amazed. And Denise also said, we need to shout about it and not be sort of polite about it either. So I did, and I remember at the dinner, because it's a bit like at a wedding actually. Yeah. When you've got to give a speech, so you kind of don't have that second glass of wine, and you're kind of sitting there waiting. And I'm just thinking, I'm in the lion's den and I'm about to stand up. And anyway, so I got up and I thought they were just going to literally lob rotten tomatoes at me. And it was quite funny because I sort of started and I looked out over the room, and of course it was
thousands of people there.
Mainly guys, and it was a dinner jacket event, so everyone was sort of sitting there. And as I sort of started on the topic, I could literally, everyone was talking to start with because they couldn't care less, obviously. And then as people started to realize what I was about to say, I could literally see all these male eyes looking at me, thinking, please don't say what I think you're about to say. And then these very few female eyes looking at me saying, please say what I think you're about to say. And yeah, it was good, but more importantly, so I think when you said, what are we doing about it? Yeah. Having got through that, and I wasn't pelted.
You're not.
It gave me kind of strength and confidence to stand up. I say be counted, but stand up and keep saying this. Yes. Which I do on behalf of obviously our company, but on behalf of the industry as well. Yeah. I was very flattered when after that there's a group called She Breaks the Law that founded, and they got in touch and asked if I could sort of join their advisory board, which I do. And we kind of try and make a difference, and it's two-pronged. Part of it is because it's the right thing to do. Part of it, in fact, it's three-pronged. Part of it is because we genuinely feel and know that if you've got multiple people sitting around a table, if they are all white male, privately educated, and they literally went to the same school and the same university and then trained at the same magic circle firm, chances are they're going to have the same opinion on it because that's the way it's gone.
Yes.
So you don't need 6 people, you only need 1 because they're all going to say the same thing. So you get a sort of richer view on life and richer data set for decision making if you have a diverse group of people. But also it's kind of, it's good for business as well. And so going back to kind of Elevate and what we started, it was looking at the market and saying, look, there appears to be one way of doing this at the moment. We think there's another way of doing it. And as part of the flexibility, as part of where you sit in the world, in the country, is it in an office, is it at home? It's what's in your head that counts. And kind of, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And it doesn't matter what you look like, what your orientation is, what your gender is.
No.
And so if we could set up an organization where pretty much all of the sort of metrics and everything we're judged on and everything our customers pay us for is an output or an outcome.
Yeah.
A couple of things happen. One is we can price for that output, as opposed to the old way, which is I'm going to start on this project and I will deliver that output. But at the moment, I haven't started yet, so I don't know how long it's going to take me. So I can't tell you how much it's going to cost because I have to wait till I've finished and then look to see how many hours I spent. And then, because we are focusing on repeatable business of law stuff, and I keep talking about contracts, but they're a massive growth part of our business at the moment. And every company has contracts. So we'll look at a bunch of contracts and some will be short, some will be long, but so we kind of look at a bunch and say, okay, it's going to be £100 a contract to do X. Well, if you've got 50 contracts, before we even start what it's going to cost you for that project. So there's sort of certainty on that. So you now know what we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver it, and how much it's going to cost you. Now you know that, it's up to us to do the work. And we could rent a big marble building in London EC2. We could hire a bunch of privately educated Oxbridge guys and make them wear dark suits and ties and black shoes and do it that way. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing
but
wrong
we
with
could also have the work done by
women,
young mums at home who are doing it on their laptop at the kitchen table whilst they're feeding the kids. What do you care?
No. So long as the work
is done right and on time. So that's what we set out to do from a business point of view. It's combined very nicely with the sort of diversity element. It will not surprise you that for all the challenge and trauma that the last 18 months has thrown at the world because of COVID, actually it's highlighted the way Elevate does work as because before then, one of the things that in my sales job, I've over the years been told by people that, you just don't understand. There is only one way of doing this. And the way you're suggesting just couldn't possibly, we couldn't possibly do work at home. I would wager that every partner of every Magic Circle firm in London delighted their clients last year in the way that they have for the last 20 years. None of them went to an office or put a tie on to do that. So it doesn't mean you can't put your tie back on. It doesn't mean you can't go to an office, but sort of please stop telling me that that's the only way that this could be done.
Absolutely.
And it's helped, and things like technology as well. Instead of being a threat, it's allowed you to work at home, which is the only place you could work last year. So wasn't that a good thing? It's not.
So you were actually ahead of the curve in many respects, and in business, people would have called you a disruptor. The people who start something new as different. The Steve Bartletts of this world would call you, a disruptor in a sector which was same. And now, actually, our sector or the sector is following what you started, and people probably, offices won't go back to the traditional model in that way. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah. I think so, to some extent. I mean, who knows who will go back? But of course, people will go back to offices. But the idea of that sort of jacket on the back of the chair, sort of burning in the midnight oil. I mean, the work will still need to be done.
Yeah.
And it is helpful to physically be together, and we've all missed it.
Yes,
I'm
of course.
a hugely social animal. I've missed it very, very badly.
Yeah.
But everyone has had to figure out other ways to do the work. And now we've got two ways of doing the work.
Yeah.
Will it go back to 100% of the old way? Absolutely not. Will everyone stay at home and never go to an office? Absolutely not. I think there's sort of, there's some space in the middle where people will land. But no, it's. I don't want to say COVID's been helpful, because it hasn't. But
no,
it has been a helpful thing to help some rather traditional, old-fashioned people see that there is another way to operate, and it does work.
And force the issue, of course, of people refusing, for example, flexible working. The right to flexible working. There's a right to apply, isn't it? Yeah. There's a right. There's no automatic right. There's a right to refusal, of course. But it's for some of those issues, and so it's good to hear it. John, I wonder if we could just move on a bit and ask a little bit about what advice would you give to younger people who maybe they're undergrads studying law, or some are doing the LPC, maybe even the bar course, but who are thinking of entering the law, and a bit of guidance, really, maybe 3 tips on how to stay resilient. Because, for some of those younger people, the last 18 months, and I've been very concerned about it, have been hell. And they're worried about opportunities in the law, how to carry on, rejection in training places. So I wondered if you had any kind of guidance, perhaps, any advice for young people.
I always feel I'm not really qualified to give anyone advice on anything, but I do think you used the word resilience, and I think it's one of the traits that I personally have had to rely on, over my career more than anything else. And I think I would say embrace change. I know no human beings really none of us actually like change. Yes, if you were to ask any of my colleagues, I get grumpy when we get a new app we need to use or something, so yes. I think the law in particular, and I say this because, and I mentioned earlier that sort of velvet rope that I felt earlier in my career. I guess I'm lucky in that I've become kind of comfortable in my own skin, but I thought, as somebody that was selling into the legal sector, it always felt slightly out of reach to me, and nobody missed a chance to remind me that I wasn't a lawyer. And so I think one of the things I would say is that if you are coming into the law, and again, I'm talking corporate rather than obviously, as a barrister, you have to be, to put your wig on and go into court. But if you're talking about coming into kind of corporate legal, it's a much bigger industry, and I would say industry rather than profession. It is a much bigger industry now than it ever used to be, because there was that velvet rope before, and you either got your training contract or you didn't. You either became partner or you didn't, and you were either a lawyer or you weren't. But everything that I've been chatting about today have been examples of there is that lawyer piece of legal work, but there is also a huge technology piece. There is also kind of project management. Lawyers also need to be business people and understand how to run a business and how to make money and how to be efficient. And there's been a lot of it's kind of funny because I mentioned that I've been on this journey for about 35 years now. The last company that I worked in was predominantly low-end legal work being done in India. And there were a whole bunch of companies at the time that started up doing that. And if you were to read any of the legal press at the time, it was all very sort of hysteria driven. Oh my God, the Indians are going to take your jobs. There won't be any lawyers left in London. All the work's going to India. Well, of course it wasn't.
Yeah.
But nobody had ever thought of that before. So the idea that with labour arbitrage and time zone capabilities, it was attractive to do a certain amount of work in somewhere like India or the Philippines or Krakow or wherever it was. When that was new, that just seemed hugely threatening. And so the kind of legal establishment literally tried to crush us down and stop it. They came up with every reason it wasn't going to work because they saw it as a threat. We didn't see it as a threat. We realized that, in the old days, and this, I guess, is where your bit of the law might touch ours. If in the old days, you watch those old Enron, I was use as an example, those old Enron videos, the FBI guys walking out with the cardboard boxes with the folders in. Well, that's fine. But now they would walk out with your mobile phone.
Oh, yeah.
And on your mobile phone is a gazillion times more data than was in those cardboard boxes. So there has just been this explosion in the amount of data that needs to be considered when you're looking at a legal case. And we've got some data that on a graph that shows the sort of data going right up to the bottom left to the top right. And then if you look at the number of people popping out of law school over the next 10 years, it barely moves. So there comes a point where, frankly, even if you've got all the money in the world to throw at a problem, you're going to run out of lawyers. So moving certain low-level work to a location like India was not only logical, was not only cost effective, it was sort of essential because you can't have everyone in London doing this because you're going to run out of them. So there is project management, there is moving work, there's technology. So I would say if you're coming, that there will be people that just want to be a pure play lawyer.
Yes.
And the good news for them is that all of these things, if used properly, will help you end up with just the cream of the crop that the reason that you did go to Cambridge or did get a law degree or become a solicitor for, the really interesting intellectual work that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Because the first cut of the 50,000 documents was done by a machine, and was done by some technology with some artificial intelligence to help cut it down. The second cut of 10,000 was done by some highly experienced lawyers in India who cut it down to 100 documents, and it's the 100 documents that you will then get to review, and that's actually what you want to do if you're at a Magic Circle firm, and that's why people go to Magic Circle firms for that expertise.
And if you don't want to, and you went to an ex-poly, you don't know anybody in law,
yes,
but you're interested in how the law works and the business of law and all the other aspects that you've talked about, then it's good to know all the other pockets you're talking about, the management side, the entrepreneurial side, the profit side, so that you're whole. So there is, in your model, and certainly the advice you're talking about is look at all the other aspects that make up the law.
Yes, absolutely. Because it takes, and this comes back to what we were talking about around diversity, because one of the other elements of diversity is the sort of socio-economic lack of diversity of people that end up here. I had a fascinating chat the other day with a lady called Sophie Pender, who I would highly recommend for a podcast. She's founded something called the 93% Club, which represents the 93% is the representation of state educated people in legal. And she has an absolutely fascinating story. But I was doing a sort of welcome induction session with a new team at Elevate the other day, and we sort of went around the table to introduce ourselves, and it was kind of, say your name and kind of a little bit about your background, and they were all in their early 20s, and so the first person had got a law degree from this and became a lawyer last September. It was, everyone went round, and one person round the table, I could just tell looked a little bit uncomfortable, and basically said she'd been working in a bar and she'd been working as a waitress, and we sort of moved on. And I called out to everyone because I knew how she would feel, because that was me back in the day, and second of all, there's nothing wrong with being a lawyer. So it was great that the other people all had a law degree, but I did say to everyone, please don't think that just because you've got a law degree that somehow you've got all the answers and this other person hasn't.
Yes.
Because I can tell you that most of our business is based on looking after our customers and customer service.
Yeah.
And a lawyer, lots of lawyers I know who are lovely people, can sit in a dark room with the door shut and do very, very clever work. But you put them in front of a customer and get them to give a sharp, succinct answer, or understand when someone's upset, and they just don't have the skill set to do that.
Yeah.
If you've worked in a bar, or if you've worked as a waiter or waitress, there is, I think on earth, it's the most extreme version of customer service, because you meet somebody immediately.
Yeah.
And you've got to hold, you don't know what they're going to ask for. You've got to hold kind of everything in your head, and things go wrong in restaurants all the time.
Oh yeah.
And people go nuts, and it's how you deal with them on your feet. You are the front line. You're not the management. You're the front line provider. And that is a skill set that I and we value just as highly as I've got a law degree. And in the same way as the person that was a waitress won't be able to do some of the legal work, some of the lawyers won't be able to do the customer work. And so it's kind of putting those teams together, and giving sort of credit where it's due, and hope. So I think, I don't know what advice I would give anyone, but I do think that the market is more open in legal than people might think from the outside. So, please don't think, if you haven't had that very traditional education, that this is not for you. And as I say, I'm not knocking joining law firms as a trainee. That's absolutely fantastic. I met up for a coffee with a young chap who had 3 offers on the table from 3 very good firms. And he asked he said, could I ask your advice on which one I should take? I didn't know. I know all the firms. They're all good firms, so I couldn't sort of say this over that. But we ended up talking about everything you and I've just talked about, which is law companies and Elevate. And whilst it wasn't remotely my intention, he ended up not taking up any of them and joining us.
Yes.
And he's done really, really well. As I say, but
it is interesting, because one of the issues are, if you are from a minority group, and part of that recruitment process is you look at the photographs of the people on the website and the names. There's some research done on that. You're called John, so I don't want to call you out. But there was a time when a significant amount of partners in those firms were Johns.
Yes.
There were no Sarahs, and there were, no Falukis. I don't know. And so that actually does not attract able, talented young lawyers to go there, because they can't see the progression and they can't see the retention, and the attrition rates are poor. But if there is a third way or another way, which is forward thinking, and I described you before as a WAM, a white heterosexual able-bodied male, because I think allies need to come in different shapes and sizes and need to believe in diversity and pragmatic. So we do need both hands to drive change. I always say this, change requires a left and right hand to drive forward change. So it's good to see what you're doing, and the advice that you've been giving is really helpful. But looking at you, John, because we're in person, hooray.
Yes.
You're kind of slick. I'm thinking suits in my mind, right? I'm kind of meeting you and thinking, wow, this is like, Harvey Specter off duty here. But I want to ask you about maybe, your aspirations in your own life, whether it's a favorite book or whether you've got a favorite fictional lawyer in mind. But, where does your inspiration come from? And, and your Harvey Specter of duty, because, you believe in other ways of working, right? So that's why you don't need to put a tie on for me. But I wonder if you could share some of that with me. Where does your inspiration come from? Is it a book? And if it is, what is your favorite book? And whether you've got a favorite fictional lawyer.
That is hysterical. I don't know if you were put up to this.
No, it's my podcast.
But my favourite fictional character is Harvey Specter.
Harvey Specter. I know.
Yes.
I know. I'm getting old, aren't I?
So predictable, aren't I? I know. That was fun.
Oh, you didn't even know that was coming.
No, I had no idea. No, I think I wanted to be, when I was at school, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I'm not very I'm not remotely academic, so I felt rather sort of I was threatened, but I actually went to a very, very academic school. So everyone I was at school with was so much more booky than I was, that I was the sort of outcast and I was always bottom of the class, and I sort of thought I was rather stupid. It was only when I left I realised that they were all just so extreme. I was perfectly normal. So I actually had no aspirations for kind of spending years at law school or becoming a doctor or anything like that. Right. I wanted to be a businessman. I didn't know what a businessman was because I grew up in Oxford, and everyone there was very booky and academic and wore tweed jackets, and so suits wasn't on at the time. But that idea of
Inspector Morse, I'm thinking of now.
Yeah, exactly. Goodness. So no, I wanted to just have kind of a briefcase and wear a blue suit and do business stuff. That's kind of what fired me up.
Oh, right. And not have bananas and a sandwich in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Proper grown-up job.
Yeah. So, one of the business people that I've admired over the years has always been Richard Branson. And my reason for doing that is he, like me, is not a sort of intellectual academic.
No.
He left school early.
He's dyslexic.
Yes. Yeah. And he has approached industries like the airline industry, where at the time, British Airways, there was sort of one, if you wanted to go to New York, there was kind of one way of doing it. And it was the old school establishment way. And you sort of got what you got and you paid what you paid. And he came in as, you used the word disruptor earlier. We don't like to think of ourselves as a disruptor, but just as sort of a newer, fresher way of looking at things, and has been successful in doing that. Yeah. Has that meant that British Airways or anyone else has had to go out of business? Absolutely not. No, but there is, and there's plenty of people that will like flying BA, but there is now a choice with the Virgins of this world as well, and they've become credible, and they're no longer little risky startups. They are
innovators, probably a better word.
So he's an example of somebody that I've always followed, and what he has done is an example of the kind of thing that we're trying to do at Elevate, I think, rather than disrupt or knock anyone else out. There's plenty of room for everyone.
I'd like to ask you about well-being. Our sector is not great at well-being, and there's a lot of work being done, from the Bar Association. Well-being, brilliant in many, many different ways. Bar Council, the Law Society, Stephanie Boyce, the president, is very keen to get well-being further up the agenda. But it's long hours, exhausting, sometimes living off coffee. Maybe that's just me. And so I'd just like to ask you, particularly as a leader of a law company like yours, which is trying to do interesting things, innovate in different ways, work in a slightly different way than the traditional model. What do you do for your own well-being, or really, what would you like to do?
I'm very lucky in that I come from a big family. and we have 3 children, and we're a very, very close-knit bunch. And so there's actually sort of no room left in my life for doing anything else, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because I find my family life is a nice kind of counterbalance to my work life. I'm fortunate in that my job, as I said, is a salesperson. So I don't need to spend all day sitting at a desk like some of my colleagues do, and that's just lucky for me. I need to go and see our customers and talk to our customers, so I'm physically out and about. And I said, I'm very social, and so the last year has been tricky not being able to see people. So I'm kind of out and about a lot, and then we also have a global business, which means that there isn't, however long your working day is. My colleague Liam is in LA, so he's up at 3 p.m. So I can't outrun him in the evening. And then my colleagues in sort of Asia and Hong Kong and India are at the other end. So you never reach a point where there is no end of the day, basically. So you need to kind of find a way to finish. I need to find a way to finish my day and just put it down, and not, because otherwise you could just work the whole time. So I think there's a little bit of discipline. I think there's kind of, I say, process around it, but we as an organization can only operate if we all sort of follow some similar principles and work in a similar way. Otherwise, it would be very, very chaotic. One of the things that we use, which I'd highly recommend, it's an app. It's called 15/5. It's a mechanism that you use every 5 days, so once a week, and it takes you 15 minutes just to kind of fill in at a high level what it is that you're working on and how you're feeling in life as well, how stressed or otherwise you are, what your workload is like, are you underwater or over water, and the whole organization is, so there's 1,500 of us around the world now.
Wow.
Yes, and the whole company uses it, and if you manage people, it just takes you a few minutes on a Friday to just look through all of your team's sort of pulse and see how they're doing. And whilst that alone won't fix the problem, it does mean that we are aware, because as you know, like you, me and everyone else, we all have weeks where everything's going according to plan and we're feeling fine and healthy, and we all have weeks where that's not the case.
Yes.
And this is a mechanism to allow managers to spot the people that need the care when they need it, and a little bit of extra attention to see why you're feeling underwater. And then further up the organization, it allows senior management to see, why does this team always seem to have this going on and this team always seem to have this going on, and sort of and then hopefully find some answers and some ways around it. So that's an easy tool. That's a useful little thing. Yeah. And then my other kind of relaxation, I suppose, is going to the theatre.
Yes.
Which tops everything for me. However stressful a week has been, if we're out at the theatre on a Friday night, it is lovely. We're very lucky because we live in central London. So we, other than for the last year, we normally try and go to the theatre at least once a week. So we try and see kind of everything from the big obvious shows at the big theatres down to the little, new play at the Southwark Playhouse or whatever it is. There's something magical about live performance. You actually have to put your mobile on airplane mode. Yeah. So you have to switch off and throw yourself into it. And that's a very good sort of...
I'm so thrilled you said that, because I'm a trustee of the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester. Oh. Yes, so I'm always desperate to get lawyers and those working in the legal sector to come to the theatre, because it's an escapism. So might I give you a suggestion, perhaps not at our theatre, but Martin Shaw, Judge John Deed, is starring in the Chekhov play, Cherry Orchard, from the 1st of November at Windsor theatre.
Okay.
So it will be a good play because I
look
know
forward to
that
it,
he's been rehearsing like mad.
Yeah.
And the treasure of my inn, Gray's Inn, his daughter is in it. So it's going to be fantastic. She's a very talented young woman, not in-law. John, tell me, your daughter recently got married, one of your three.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm just wondering, as an ally, really, what hopes have you got for, her daughter or son for the workplace and things to come? You already said you yourself have been privileged and so on and so forth, but that's not stopped you. I often say it doesn't matter where you've come from, it's where you're going and what you want to do to change the narrative that we have. So I'm just interested in really, given we've still got huge gender pay gap, certainly for women, well, there's a whole load of issues. What are you hoping to see, by the time you have a granddaughter or a grandson? How are you hoping the sector is looking? Do you see there being no offices, which you've talked about?
No, I don't see there being no offices. I just hope I hope that there is even more change over the next 20 years than there has been in the last 20 years. Because if I think back to the time that I started in my career, as I say, even with my own privileged upbringing, I felt slightly outside of, the club for various reasons. So I would hope that any of my future grandchildren would enjoy a far more sort of equal workplace. My daughter is already an entrepreneur, so I'm super proud of her. Yeah. And my older son is an entrepreneur as well.
Wow.
So they've both grasped life with both hands and done something for themselves rather than go and get a job at, a law firm or a consulting firm or whatever. And that's been an amazing source of pride.
Yeah.
I think what it's highlighted is that whilst they both have had a traditional education, one of the things I feel strongly about is that I don't quite want to say our education system is not fit for purpose, because it's a way of learning. But if you look at the change that's happened in the world over the last 20 years, and it's very, very technology driven.
Yes.
But there are jobs today
which didn't exist
in sectors that didn't exist.
Absolutely.
Because obviously when I was their age, the internet hadn't started yet.
Yeah, yes.
So if you think of that, fast forward to your question of what are my grandchildren who haven't even been born yet are going to be doing in 25, 30 years' time, what will the world look like then? Obviously, none of us can answer that. And therefore, the education system that we have, which is effectively the same way that my parents were educated, as I say, it's not bad, but it's like everything else I've been saying today. It can't be the only way. And so I hope that they're brought up in a way that allows them to build a skill set and become the people they want to be, and that there is a work environment that values them for those things, rather than this slightly cookie cutter system we have at the moment, which again I say because I personally fell outside of it. I was being judged by whether or not
you got the grades
on
and the
one
marks.
particular hour in June in a silent room in the school hall, I could remember and write down some things I'd been told a few months ago that just didn't interest me in the slightest. So guess what? I didn't do very well. But I'm personally lucky in that I found something that fires me up in life, that I'm very passionate about. And I've just sort of, I can't remember, was it resilience or tenacity, but I've just kind of kept at it. And finally, here we are, and we've got this amazing company, and people are sort of saying, that maybe there is another way of doing these things. So for all of those reasons, I would hope that in the workplace, but before then in their education, our next generations of children and grandchildren would, see some change in all of that.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. And I mean, the education system is a whole other conversation, isn't it? And legal apprenticeships. Well, John, we're coming to the end of our time together. Gosh, we could carry on all day, couldn't we? It's so interesting talking to you and seeing your vision and kind of, how you thrived. I wonder what's next. Elevate acquired Hailbury Law, which was set up by Denise Nurse and Janvi Patel, fantastic law firm, two best friends, and you're doing wonderful things. Yeah. You've got, as you've said, 1,500 staff globally, or colleagues. So you're doing wonderfully well, but I'm just wondering what's next for you?
Someone asked me the same question about a week ago. I know, sorry. And the answer I gave, which you might think is a rather odd answer, was I want us to become boring. And what I mean is that our journey so far has been sort of smashing glass ceilings and doing new stuff. And whilst I obviously hope and know that we will continue to evolve, I don't think it needs to be this dramatic going forward. We've kind of proven a point. It doesn't have to be just this way. There is another way. Yeah. I'm delighted to say that the number of people that are, I said earlier that the establishment was trying to stop us. They haven't. We're here. There are other big players. The big four have all sort of jumped into this space as well. So it's now a thing. Yeah. And you can't keep on sort of coming up with brand new, crazy, looked at the time like crazy new ways of doing things. So I would like us just to become a bigger, more established, trusted. I would like people to stop when you go to conferences and listen to these fireside chats on panels of, do you think this is, do you think there's any future? Do you think this is a thing? I think we all know it's a thing now. So I hope that Elevate will just continue to grow. And we've got this broad range of offerings. And I hope that our existing customers will work with us more and more. And then I hope that, new customers will come along. But I don't think we need to keep looking for new things to do. I think there is I don't know what the number is. It's a huge number. Mark Cohen says it's $1 trillion market. It doesn't matter. It's just doesn't matter what the number is. It's a huge market. So there's plenty for us, plenty for everyone else, plenty for the law firms, plenty for the law departments. But I would just like the next 10 years of my career for us to kind of step up and grow into becoming a kind of an established, Accenture, so to speak.
Wow. Well, John Croft, thank you for talking law with me. I almost felt like saying this is your life or something, actually, as I was saying that. This is your life. But thank you. It's been fascinating interviewing you. And I look forward to hearing more and you coming back on at some stage.
Lovely. Well, it's very nice to meet you in person, Sally. Thank you for having me.
A big thank you to John Croft for talking law with me, Sally Penni MBE. And thanks again to Elevate for supporting this episode. Do visit elevateservices.com to find out more. If you would like to support Talking Law, then please get in touch. You can find me on Twitter @SallyPenny1 or search for Sally Penni or Women in the Law UK on LinkedIn or Instagram. Make sure you catch up with our previous episodes too, where you can hear my interviews with guests such as family law specialist James Brown, barrister and TV personality Rob Brinder, and Stephanie Boyce, the president of the Law Society of England and Wales. Thanks to our production team Sam Walker and Michael Blades at What Goes On Media. Bye for now.